For decades, dressage has quietly followed a script. It has told us what the ideal horse should look like. It has shown us how that horse should move. And perhaps most importantly, it has taught us where that horse should come from. The modern dressage champion is expected to be tall, elastic, expressive, and almost always a warmblood, bred in Germany or the Netherlands or Denmark. These are not just countries, they are systems. They are breeding empires that have shaped the very identity of the sport. And if you want to win at the highest level, the message has been clear for years. You follow that system. You ride those horses. You present that picture. You play the game the way it has been written. But every so often, a rider comes along who doesn't rewrite the rules loudly. They simply make a decision that quietly challenges everything. Because while the world has been watching Justin Verboomen rise to the very top of international dressage, while they have been celebrating his precision, his calmness, and his almost understated brilliance, he has made a move that could mean far more than it seems on the surface. He did not invest in another proven warmblood superstar. He did not follow the obvious path. Instead, he went back to Portugal, and he chose a 4-year-old Lusitano stallion named Satélite Plus. At first glance, it looks like a simple investment in a young horse. But if you look closer, this is a decision that touches breeding politics, judging systems, economic power structures, and the future direction of the sport itself. To understand why this matters, you first have to understand that modern dressage is not just a sport, it's an ecosystem. And at the center of that ecosystem is breeding. Over the past several decades, a very specific type of horse has come to dominate the international arena. Warmbloods have been selectively bred for movement that is bigger, more elastic, and more expressive than anything seen before. Their trot has become more elevated, their shoulder freedom more exaggerated, their presence more dramatic. And because these horses have been successful, they have shaped what judges expect to see. This is where the system becomes self-reinforcing. Judges reward a certain type of movement. Breeders produce more of that movement. Riders are trained to present it. And over time, that becomes the standard. But here is the key issue. The standard is not purely objective. It evolves. And in some cases, it drifts. Because while dressage is supposed to be judged on classical principles, rhythm, suppleness, contact, impulsion, straightness, and collection, the visual interpretation of those principles has changed. Expression has, in many cases, become more important than relaxation. Elevation has sometimes been rewarded over purity. And the line between brilliance and tension has, at times, become blurred. Behind the scenes, there has been growing unease, not just among spectators, but among riders, trainers, and even some judges. Questions have been raised about whether the sport is prioritizing spectacle over correctness, whether the breeding industry is influencing judging trends, and whether financial incentives are quietly shaping what is rewarded in the arena. Because make no mistake, the modern dressage horse is not just an athlete, it's a commodity. A successful stallion can be worth millions. A top-performing bloodline can dominate auctions, breeding contracts, and international sales. And when that much money is involved, change becomes very difficult. Within this system, Lusitanos occupy a complicated position. They are not new to dressage. In fact, historically, they are closer to the roots of classical riding than many modern warmbloods. They were bred for collection, for agility, for responsiveness. They were designed to carry weight behind, to engage the hindquarters, and to perform movements that require strength and balance rather than sheer extension. In movements like piaffe and passage, Lusitanos can be exceptional. Their ability to sit, to compress, and to remain expressive without losing balance is often remarkable. However, they do not always produce the same kind of extended trot that dominates modern judging. They do not always have the same exaggerated front leg mechanics. In a sport where visual impression plays a significant role, that difference matters. Because judging, even when guided by clear criteria, is still influenced by expectation. When judges are accustomed to seeing a certain type of horse win, anything different must work harder to be recognized as equally correct. This creates an invisible barrier, not an official rule, but a cultural one, a bias that is rarely spoken about openly, but widely understood. And this is why Lusitanos, despite their strength, have often remained on the margins of top-level dressage. Respected, admired, occasionally successful, but rarely dominant. This is where Justin Verboomen becomes so significant, because his rise to the top has already challenged some of these assumptions. He is not a rider who relies on force. He does not chase exaggerated movement at the expense of harmony. Instead, his riding is defined by clarity, balance, and feel. When you watch him ride, there is a noticeable absence of struggle. The horse appears to understand, to respond, to move with him rather than against him. And in a time when dressage is facing increasing criticism over welfare concerns, that approach stands out. It resonates with a growing audience that is questioning where the sport is heading. And importantly, it wins. That is what makes it powerful. Because it is one thing to advocate for harmony, it is another to prove that harmony can succeed at the highest level. Now, with Satélite Plus, Verboomen is extending that philosophy into breeding and horse selection. He is not just riding differently, he is choosing differently. And that is where the real disruption begins. When a world #1 rider invests in a young stallion, it sends a signal. Breeders notice, investors notice, stud books notice. Because success at the top level directly influences what is considered valuable. If a particular type of horse wins, demand increases. If a certain bloodline becomes associated with the success, it becomes commercially powerful. This is how breeding trends are shaped, and this is why Verboomen's decision matters beyond his own career. By choosing a Lusitano, he is effectively placing a bet on a different system. A system that has not dominated the global market. A system that does not currently define the standard. And if that bet pays off, it could shift perception. It could create new demand for Lusitano bloodlines. It could encourage breeders to reconsider what traits are prioritized. And it could challenge the dominance of the warm blood breeding industry. But this is not a neutral process, because the existing system has a great deal to lose. Warm blood breeding is a global business. It is supported by auctions, sponsorships, training systems, and international networks. And it is deeply connected to competition results. If those results begin to shift, so does the economic balance. However, even if Satélite Plus develops into an exceptional horse, there is still one major hurdle: judging. Dressage judging is designed to be objective, but in practice, it is influenced by trends, expectations, and collective perception. Over time, judges develop a sense of what a top horse looks like, and that image becomes a reference point. So when a horse enters the arena that does not fit that image, it may be judged differently, not intentionally, not unfairly in a conscious sense, but differently. Because human perception is shaped by familiarity. This is why change in dressage is often slow. It requires not just new horses or new riders, but a shift in collective understanding. Judges must be willing to reward different expressions of correctness, to recognize quality even when it does not look exactly like what they are used to seeing. And that is a much deeper transformation. At the same time, the sport is facing increasing scrutiny from outside. Public perception is changing. There is growing awareness of training practices, more discussion of tension, stress, and ethical responsibility. And this is where horses like Satélite Plus take on an even greater significance. Because Lusitanos, by their nature, require a different approach. They do not respond well to force. They demand precision, timing, and sensitivity. And when trained correctly, they can demonstrate a level of harmony that aligns closely with classical ideals. In that sense, this project is not just about competition, it is about direction. It raises questions about what kind of riding we want to see, what kind of horses we want to reward, and what values should define the sport moving forward. Satélite Plus is still just a young horse. He has not proven himself. He has not yet entered the arena at the highest level. And there is no guarantee that this project will succeed. But that is not what makes it important. What makes it important is what it represents. A willingness to question the system, a willingness to take a different path, a willingness to imagine a different future. Because in the end, dressage is not just shaped by rules or results. It is shaped by choices. And sometimes, the quietest choices are the ones that change everything.